The Whispering Shadows, Part 5. The hollow stood silent behind them, but the air around it felt charged with something that hadn't been there before. As Ben, Sarah, and Lucy made their way back to town, the stillness felt unnatural, as if the entire town of Blackwood was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Lucy was weak, leaning on Ben for support, but her eyes, though still haunted, were clear again. "Do you really think it's over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben glanced back at the hollow, its dark frame looming against the night sky. "I don't know," he admitted. "We stopped the spirits from using you, but something doesn't feel right." Sarah nodded in agreement. "The house, it didn't feel like it was finished with us. It felt like it was waiting." As they reached the edge of town, the quiet streets of Blackwood were bathed in the eerie glow of streetlights, but there was no comfort in it. The shadows seemed longer, darker, clinging to the corners and alleys like silent watchers. The town felt wrong, as if it had shifted in some way, becoming something different. The next few days were a blur. Lucy stayed with Ben and his family, too afraid to be alone, and neither of them could sleep for more than a few hours. Every time they closed their eyes, the nightmares came. Visions of the shadows reaching for them, the voices whispering in the darkness, calling their names. But it wasn't just Ben, Lucy, and Sarah who were haunted. Strange things began happening around town. People reported hearing whispers late at night, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere. A few claimed they saw figures moving in the shadows, just at the edge of their vision. But when they looked again, nothing was there. It was as if the whole town was infected by something that had escaped from the hollow. One afternoon, as they sat in Ben's kitchen, trying to make sense of everything, there was a knock at the door. Ben's mother opened it to reveal Mrs. Thompson, an older woman who lived a few blocks away. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a shawl tightly around her shoulders. "I need to speak to you," she said, her voice trembling. "Something's happening. I've been hearing things at night, voices, and my husband, he's been acting strange." Ben's mother frowned. "Strange how?" Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with fear. "He's not himself. He stares at me, but it's like he's not really looking. And sometimes when I call his name, he doesn't answer. It's like something else is inside him." Ben, Lucy, and Sarah exchanged nervous glances. "What if," Lucy began, her voice faltering, "what if the spirits didn't leave? What if they're possessing people in the town?" Ben's stomach turned. It made sense. They had freed the trapped souls from the hollow, but instead of crossing over, they had latched onto the living, looking for new vessels to inhabit. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "They didn't leave the house," Ben said quietly. "They left with us." Sarah's face drained of color. "Then what do? We can't fight all of them. There could be dozens, maybe more." "We need help," Ben said, standing up. "We need to talk to someone who knows more about this than we do." Lucy nodded. "There's someone who might know. My grandmother, before she passed, she used to tell me stories about the spirits in this town. She said there were old ways to protect against them, things people used to do when the veil between the living and the dead was thin. Maybe she left something behind. Books, notes, something that could help us." It was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. Later that day, they made their way to Lucy's childhood home. It was an old, creaky house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by thick trees. Lucy hadn't been back since her grandmother's death, and stepping inside felt like opening a door to the past. Dust clung to the old furniture, and the air smelled of must and forgotten memories. Lucy led them to the attic, where her grandmother had kept her most precious belongings. As they searched through the cluttered room, Lucy found an old chest tucked away in the corner. Inside were handwritten notes, yellowed pages filled with her grandmother's cramped handwriting. "These are her notes," Lucy said, her voice full of awe. "She wrote about the spirits, about the rituals and protections. There's so much here." Ben leaned over her shoulder, scanning the pages. One passage caught his eye. It spoke of the Whispering Ones, the same spirits they had encountered at the hollow, but it also mentioned something they hadn't known before. "There's a way to stop them," Ben read aloud. "It's risky, but it's possible. If we can gather the right materials and perform the binding ritual, we can trap the spirits and banish them permanently. But we'll need to do it soon, before they grow too strong. Sarah bit her lip. What happens if we don't? Ben's eyes darkened as he read the next line. If we fail, they'll spread. Not just through Blackwood, but beyond. They'll take over anyone they can, growing stronger until nothing can stop them. Lucy's hand trembled as she closed the notebook. Then we have no choice. We have to try. With renewed determination, they began preparing for the ritual. They gathered herbs, candles, and protective symbols, following Lucy's grandmother's instructions to the letter. But they knew that time was running out. The spirits were already growing bolder, slipping into the bodies of the townspeople, slowly turning them into something unrecognizable. The night of the ritual arrived, and the three of them returned to the hollow one last time. The house stood silent, but there was an ominous energy in the air, as if the spirits knew what was coming. They set up the ritual circle in the heart of the house, lighting the candles and spreading the protective herbs around them. Ben held the silver pendant tightly, the same one that had saved Lucy before. As they began the ritual, the air in the room shifted, growing thick and oppressive. The temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, louder than ever. Shadows flickered along the walls, moving faster, more frantically, as if they were trying to break free. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, and the shadows surged forward, crashing against the protective circle like waves against a dam. "Keep going," Lucy shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise. Ben raised the pendant, shouting the words of the ritual into the darkness. The shadows recoiled, hissing in pain, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they began to coalesce into a single, towering figure, a mass of darkness with burning eyes that seemed to pierce their very souls. "You cannot banish us," the figure growled, its voice a chorus of the trapped spirits. "We are eternal." But Ben didn't stop. He held the pendant high, his voice steady as he recited the final words of the ritual. The pendant glowed with a blinding light, cutting through the darkness like a knife. The figure let out a howl of rage as the light intensified, its form dissolving into the air, scattering the shadows. For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a final thunderous crack, the house shuddered, and the shadows vanished. The whispering ones were gone. Exhausted, the three of them collapsed to the floor, the weight of what they had just done settling over them like a heavy blanket. The house, once filled with dark energy, was now eerily quiet. "It's over," Ben said, his voice hoarse. But as they stood to leave, Lucy paused at the door, her eyes scanning the darkened corners of the room. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them. "We've stopped them," she whispered, "but they'll never be truly gone. Not as long as people remember them." Ben nodded solemnly. "Maybe, but for now we've given Blackwood a chance to heal." And with that, they stepped out of the hollow, leaving its haunted past behind. But as they walked away, they knew that some shadows were always waiting, just beyond the light, waiting for the moment they would be remembered again.